This is Gardening in America, and I'm Ed Hume. Today we're in Spokane, Washington, and I'm with the horticultural manager of the Spokane Parks Department, Jim Fly. Jim, where is Manito Park?
Manito is located in Spokane on the south side of town in the area that we refer to as the South Hill. And that's south of the interstate about 8 blocks and south of the downtown area by about a mile.
Yeah. What area are we in here?
This is the Duncan Formal Renaissance Garden, and it's patterned after a European-style Renaissance garden that has a lot of symmetry and arches, and of course the central feature is the fountain.
Yeah, and I want our viewers to know, Jim, that we're in the center of the garden, so this garden is huge. And in fact, you know, we've had an opportunity to visit many city parks throughout North America, and this is maybe one of the most outstanding in that you can visit a beautiful formal garden like this and many other features which we're going to talk about with no admission fee.
That's correct, Ed. One of the unique features about Manito Park is that all the entry fees are free. None of the gardens have a charge for entrance.
Isn't that wonderful? And down here at the very end of the garden is a greenhouse. What do you call that?
That's Geyser Conservatory, and that's the home of subtropicals and tropicals, and then periodically throughout the year we have a lot of seasonal displays. If you were to come during Easter, we'd have a lot of Easter lilies. At Christmas time it's poinsettias, and just varying floral displays throughout the year depending upon the season.
You know, Jim, of all the areas, in addition to this, of course, the one outstanding feature that our crew really enjoyed is the perennial garden, because you have done a magnificent job of labeling the perennials.
Well, thanks, Ed. That was a major renovation project that we started about 1.5 years ago and just really finished this spring. And the perennials are starting to really take on their own form. And we've labeled everything because we want to try and also educate the public about the different types of plants and the many uses and many types of perennials that are available to the gardening public.
Oh, yeah. And it's what I like about the various areas here in the park is that you can get ideas on color combinations. You've done a magnificent job here. But now you have a rose garden.
Right.
Rose
Hill Garden. We have the Nishinamaya Japanese Garden. We have a lilac garden. We have the Ferris Perennial Gardens. We have Duncan Formal Gardens. And then there's a lot of native and wild areas in the park, and a duck pond that's down on the lower part of the park, and a lot of picnicking areas.
Right.
A lot of areas that are a lot of private areas where you can just kind of find a place to relax and enjoy the park.
Thanks, Jim. This is truly one of North America's beautiful city parks. And next time you're in Spokane, a great place to visit. Look at this area. This has been a problem area ever since we moved into our home a couple years ago. And this front entry area, I believe that 85% of the people get an impression of your home before they ever step inside the front door. And this was not very attractive. But look at it now. Wow, what a difference in just a matter of a short period of time. I'm with our hardscape specialist, Darcy Beck. Darcy, how long did this project take?
Well, actually, it took us a couple of weekends with the help of our friend Mia and some other people.
Yeah, and for television purposes, we sped it up a little bit by doing it through part of the week, too.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly.
But a couple of weeks, that's remarkable. What an incredible change.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's magnificent.
Darcy, what kind of materials were used here?
Well, in the path, Ed, we've used Mutual Materials cobblestone paver. And in the retaining wall, we've used a Roman stack stone, also produced by Mutual Materials.
They're both beautiful.
Aren't they gorgeous?
Now, where do we start?
Well, the first thing to do is to get an idea of where you want your wall to go, where your path is going to be, and in this case, we've limed out beforehand
Sure.
kind of a general idea of where that's going to be.
And then you work around that as you go along, don't you?
Exactly.
Darcy, what tools do we need to complete this job?
Well, these basic tools, Ed, that you find around the home, and you will need to rent a plate compactor and a paver cutter.
Now, we need other materials as well, don't we?
Yeah, for your base of the path and the wall, you're going to need 5/8 minus crushed rock, paver sand, and a plastic edge restraint.
Okay. Now, what's the procedure? How do we start on this whole process?
Well, for the path, you're going to need to dig out an area, the width of the path, and then for the wall, you'll need to dig a trench about 3 inches deep and a little bit wider than the retaining wall unit itself.
Darcy, what do you use as a base?
Well, for the path, Ed, we use 2 to 3 inches of crushed rock, compacted, and then about 1 inch of sand on top of that. For the retaining wall, we use about 2 inches of crushed rock in the trench.
Can you give our viewers an idea of what this might cost them to do a project like this?
This whole project, Ed, cost about $600.
Wow, what a beautiful job has been accomplished here. You saw what it looked like before, and look at it now. It totally improves the appearance of the entry area to the house, which I feel is the most important area when you're landscaping around your home. Thanks very much, Darcy.
Thank you, Ed.
I'm with Sharon Coleman, pesticide consultant and entomologist. And Sharon, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to read leaves.
All right.
You know, we read tea leaves. Well, it's time to read garden leaves because we can learn a lot and the plants will let us know what's going on.
Where should we start?
Well, I think probably we'll start with this really nice simple one. This is the kind of damage you would get if caterpillars are feeding in the garden.
Oh, I see.
They have large mandibles and they just sit there and chomp.
Sure.
And so if you think of the big C here for caterpillar, that'll help you remember that. A lot of these caterpillars feed at night.
Oh, they do.
So you've got to go out with that flashlight. And the other thing about this is that you may see the damage long after the caterpillar has finished. And so you may be spraying for nothing.
Oh, I see.
So it's real important to
Be
check.
careful, sure.
Yeah.
What's the damage here?
Now this is real typical. This is raspberry, and it's typical of a sawfly, which kind of follows the veins and makes little squares.
Oh, wow.
And we have another sawfly here on...
that one there?
Yeah, on columbine.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what it does to columbine when they're large and
Just
they've finished it.
cleans it right off.
What you do though is you watch for this new tiny damage.
Sure.
And then you also have to check the underside of the leaf
Oh, yeah.
to see if the sawflies are there, because they come and go through the summer. There's 5 generations
Oh, my
in some areas. And so sometimes they're down in the soil pupating, and if you spray then you're not going to do any good at all.
So see
you
if
want
can
to
find
target. And sometimes you can just
Yeah.
go along and squish them
Uh-huh.
while you're in the garden.
Sure. What, this damage here is kind of obvious, isn't it?
Well, yeah, the slug slime is really nice. This is snails and slugs do the same kind of thing. They have little teeth on their tongue, and so when they damage a leaf, it's kind of ratty looking.
Oh, yeah.
The holes are different sizes, and you see how you get this this area that's not quite all the way chewed. Basically, they
Sure.
have to lick the plant to death,
I see.
and so you get these ratty areas.
So, and very often the slime trail is the indicator,
That's
isn't
a
it?
real
Yeah.
big one. Or you go out at night again and you see the slugs or the snail.
Now, what's the damage here?
Now this is the one everybody sort of knows about, and that's root weevil. The damage from root weevils comes in from the edge, and you get these narrow channels and very irregular feeding.
Now, these are the actual weevils, aren't
These
they?
are different species of weevils, and this is what you'll find if you go out with the flashlight at night. And some people pick them off, or one thing I do is stick a pizza board in a pillowcase, slide it under the plant, shake the plant, and then pick them off of they'll hang onto the cloth.
Oh, they will.
And you just pick them off that way. That's easier than flashlighting for them.
Sharon, it's really important to diagnose what's happening with these leaves, isn't it?
It really is, because whether you're choosing most effective or least toxic strategies, they'll vary depending on the pest that you're dealing with.
Sure. Thank you very much. Right now is a good time to divide those spring flowering perennials. I do it during the coolest part of the day. Probably evening is the best time. But now from one part of the garden, I dug this primrose. And of course, primroses are spring flowering plants. So the first thing we do, of course, is to get as much of the root system as we can, and then we bare root it. And you can do this in water if you want to. I like to do it this way instead. Just loosen the soil. See what a nice root system that plant has? But when we look inside, we see that there are several plants from this one plant. So what we can do is basically pull them apart. Now there's one division, and sometimes, you know, these may kind of cling together and you may need a knife to do that. In this case, I don't have to. They pull apart so nicely. And is what we'll do, any of the leaves here that are really bad, we simply either cut them off or, as I'm doing, just kind of pull them away and snap them off with my fingers. Then all we have to do is to just go back here, and remember, primrose is like kind of a shaded area in the garden. Now, this is a little bit sunny at this time of the day, but during most of the day, this is a shaded spot. And this is already prepared soil. If it wasn't, is what I would do, of course, would be to add some compost or leaf mold or something like that to the soil. But as you can see, that's very good soil. And is what we'll do is basically spread the roots in here, pull this together, and the very next thing I'm going to do is to water that. However, I'm not going to take time right now because I want to show you something else, and I'll get these other two immediately into the ground. But look here, the thyme is growing out into this surrounding area. So why not transplant it too? See, it's rooted. So these are all plants that we can use in the garden. And I'm just going to take a little section here and cut it out like about so, just to give you an idea. And I'll just actually pull this part of the plant away and cut under it as much as I can. Oops, I didn't get that one part. Now this doesn't have a lot of root, but it's got quite a bit. So again, is what we'll do, since we want to extend that planting, is to just go in here, loosen up the soil a bit, like so. I think in this I would add a little bit of peat moss, even though it's very good soil, and just kind of work the soil in around and tamp that down. And again, be certain to water it in right away, which is what I'm going to do. But the spring flowering perennials, right now is a good time to dig and divide them. Today I'm surrounded by some beautiful plants of the week. In fact, in front of me is the beautiful Fuchsia Gartenmeister. Look at those gorgeous orange flowers and the foliage as well. What an attractive combination. And this is a semi-hardy fuchsia. By that I mean it's one that if we get a severe winter, it's going to die back. Mine came back this past winter, but then we had quite a mild winter. I think the texture is really good, and it's a good flowering variety and kind of an unusual flower for a fuchsia as well. This is one plant, though, if you want to keep it outside, I would give it lots of protection over the winter season. It'll grow about 2.5 feet tall. Keep that in mind. It grows in the shade, although it will tolerate a little bit of sun as well. And it likes a moist soil condition, and it's a good idea to fertilize it about once a month with a liquid type fertilizer. And then behind me here, I'm surrounded by a beautiful plant called Gaura. This is gorgeous. These look like little tiny butterflies. They've flowered since June, and these will continue to flower right up until frost. Now the white one here is a variety called whirling butterflies, and then the pink one over here is a variety called Siskiyou pink. And if you get a little bit of breeze at all, they just kind of whirl around in the breeze, and they really are very, very attractive. This is a plant, by the way, Gaura, that's perennial, so it'll come back year after year. And generally it'll grow about 3 to 4 feet in height as it matures. It'll take quite a bit of drought condition in a very sunny location in the garden. So here we have a plant that takes the shade and one that takes the sun. Late fall and early summer is a great time to add some of the hardy fuchsias to the garden. But today, before I talk about fuchsias, let me show you this plant here. This is Hebe, or commonly called Veronica. And this plant is getting a little bit too tall. I'd like to cut it down in size, but I can't because all the new flowers appear on the new growth. And you know, it's kind of a lesson to us, isn't it, that whenever we want to prune something back, we should take a look at its flowering habit. And this one we can't prune right now. But what pruning we should do is to go in here and remove these old flowers that appeared way back in June. Because if we keep the old flowers off, then this plant's going to flower for a much longer period of time. Now, let's get down to fuchsias. These are gorgeous and they do beautifully in the late summer and early fall garden. These are hardy varieties. I'm going to show you three today. This is a variety called Papoose. And as you can see by the growth habit, it's quite low growing. Has a compact growth habit, but look at the buds on it. Just great, aren't they? And then this variety is kind of like a miniature swing time, only it's a hardy variety, and it's called Santa Claus. The combination of the white and the red really are outstanding. And there again, look at all the buds on the plant. So it's a very prolific flowering variety. And then here's a really nice variety too. I'll pick off a couple of those dead flowers. But this is a variety called Peter Pan. And again, you can see it's very compact growth habit. Really a nice combination in it. And all three of these plants could be added to the garden. The important thing to keep in mind about hardy fuchsias is like the regular summer flowering. They like protection from the hot midday sun, so they like a rather shady area in the garden. Now I've prepared a planting hole for them, and as you can see, the root system is not very extensive on this particular one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of compost and also a little bit of vermiculite to the planting soil. Because remember, fuchsias like it where it's kind of moist, and yet they don't want to sit in water, so we'll give it good drainage and yet some water holding capacity too. And is what we want to keep in mind is the front and the back of the plant. There's the front of the plant, here's kind of the back of the plant. So we have a larger expanse of flower buds yet to come on. I'll just disturb, once I get it in the hole, the outer planting area just a little bit, or not planting area, but soil, just a little bit. And then I'm going to pull in a little bit of soil around the edge, and I'm going to put some more compost and vermiculite around at that stage, and then pull in the remainder of the soil here. And I'm going to make a little well kind of, so that that will hold water, because once again, remember, fuchsias like moisture. So add those beautiful hardy fuchsias to your garden now. We're in Spokane, Washington, at a beautiful private garden, a hillside garden, in fact, and I'm with the owner, Sherry Giles. Sherry, tell us a little bit about the age of the home and the beautiful stone wall behind us.
The house was built in 1917, and one of the things that they did to the garden when they built the house was to lay out the wonderful stone walls that go all the way around the back of the house. They're really neat. There are 3 steps that go up to the back garden, and then there's a wonderful curved stone bench seat that fits in.
That's beautiful.
Other than that, they kind of left it natural.
Yeah, it's nice.
Thank
Tell me
you.
also, I noticed because of all the trees, this is kind of a shade garden. What kind of shade plants are you using primarily?
We have, of course, a lot of hostas, a lot of astilbes, semicifuga, just any plants that companion well, haconocloa, different shade grasses.
Sure. You've used, I think, beautifully, and our viewers will really appreciate this, the various foliage colors and foliage textures, and that's what makes for beautiful landscaping. Tell me also about a unique feature here in the garden, I think, your basket.
The rose basket.
Yes.
The rose basket came about because we lost a hedge. We had a 15-foot high arborvitae hedge that absolutely was laid to the ground in the ice storm. And we had seen a program where they had made a basket in England, and Ron and I thought, well, you know, it's cedar, so it would last. So we put together this, it's about 8 feet by 6 foot rose basket with a big arch filled with roses and clematis.
Oh, wow.
And we love it.
And I noticed throughout the garden you have some really neat features. I saw one, for example, a bucket with some plants growing out of it. And you've used the features really so nicely. But I also want to ask you, with the hillside gardening like this, does that create some challenges for you?
Yes, but our garden is interesting because we have a lot of basalt rock. So basically, if you try and dig a hole, you're forced to build a wall in front of it, which works well on the hillside for the erosion control and so forth. But it also kind of has created a little microclimate. So we can grow a lot of plants here that maybe if we lived in a sunnier part of town, we couldn't grow. So there are good points and bad points.
Sure. Where do you get your ideas?
Well, I'm a landscape designer by profession. And also just a constant reader, and my husband will testify to all the books that I have. Visiting other people's gardens.
Sure.
I think just like you or anybody else, I think you can learn something from anybody in anybody's garden. So I read a lot and just keep my eyes open.
Thanks for sharing your garden with us.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. That's all the time we have today. Hope you can join me at the same time again next time for Gardening in America.